Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're examining a very unique, very direct piece of communication. It's an open letter, purportedly from the people of Ukraine, addressed specifically to Donald Trump. Now, this isn't your typical diplomatic note. It's raw, unfiltered. Our task today is really to unpack the core arguments, the criticisms, and frankly, the strong emotions within this document. We're focusing purely on what the letter itself says.
That's right. And it's significant because it provides a ground-level view, how statements and events are perceived inside a conflict zone. It cuts through the usual political speak. So our deep dive here is about extracting those key elements, what the authors explicitly state about leadership, war, international relations, from their lived perspective. We're relaying their message as presented in the text.
Okay, so let's get straight into it. The letter immediately tackles the perception of admiration for Vladimir Putin. And the authors, they're very clear up front. They say they aren't politicians, not diplomats. They identify themselves as, and I'm quoting here, ordinary people, citizens of a sovereign nation, fighting for its survival against tyranny. And they challenge this idea that Donald Trump admires Putin's strength. They argue it's something else entirely. They call it impunity.
Impunity.
Yeah.
That distinction is absolutely critical. It's not just a word choice. It's really the cornerstone of their entire critique in this letter. They claim, very directly, that Donald Trump sees in Putin, quote, the unchecked power you crave, the ability to lie, steal, silence, and kill without consequences.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heavy accusation.
Extremely heavy.
And they continue asserting that Putin doesn't lead Russia. He owns it like a mafia boss. But the most striking part, perhaps, is their interpretation of Trump's view on this. They say he treats Putin's behavior not as a warning, but, quote, as a model.
As a model. So not something to avoid, but something to emulate, according to the letter.
According to the letter, yes. And coming from people experiencing invasion, that interpretation, well, it paints a very specific picture of how they view certain aspects of global leadership and power. It fundamentally reframes that idea of strength into something they see as far more dangerous.
So after reframing strength as impunity, the letter then confronts head-on the reality of Putin's regime as they see it. They describe it in stark terms, not patriotism, not greatness, but, quote, fear, brutality, and corruption. And these aren't vague descriptions. They make direct accusations. They state this regime wages genocidal war on our people, and that it lies while launching missiles at homes, schools, and hospitals. It's presented as observed reality.
And this sets up a really stark contrast, because the letter then brings in direct quotes attributed to Donald Trump about the invasion itself. It references his reported comments from February 22, 2022.
Right, the genius comments.
Exactly. The letter quotes, "This is genius. Putin declares a big portion of Ukraine is independent. How smart is that? He's going to go in to be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen." Mm-hmm. And then immediately following that quote, the letter offers its refutation. A very graphic one.
How do they refute it?
By detailing the actions of that so-called peace force. The letter asks, do you know what that peace force did? And it answers its own question. They slaughtered civilians. They kidnapped and deported children. They left mass graves in Bucha, Mariupol, and Izium.
Bucha, Mariupol, Izium. These are specific locations associated with documented atrocities.
Precisely. They're not making general claims. They're pointing to specific horrific events. They then press the point directly, asking Donald Trump in the letter, what's genius about mass murder, about displacing millions of families, about executing civilians with hands tied behind their backs.
It's a direct challenge to the language used.
It is. And the judgment they deliver is equally direct. Quote, your words aren't just wrong, they're cruel. This juxtaposition, the external commentary versus the reported lived experience, is presented as not just a factual disagreement, but a deep moral failing from their perspective.
The letter then shifts focus slightly, moving from battlefield realities to political dynamics. It alleges that Donald Trump was, quote, easily manipulated. The authors state, Putin fed you lies about Ukraine, NATO, the EU, and you believed them. Or they add, worse, you didn't care if they were lies as long as they serve your ego. This accusation implies either a lack of judgment or perhaps a willful ignorance.
And this claim leads directly into their assessment of another prominent statement attributed to Donald Trump, the idea that if reelected, he would end the war in 24 hours.
How do they respond to that specific claim?
They dismiss it completely. It's described in the letter as not a peace plan, it's a surrender wrapped in bluster. They elaborate, a deal that would cost Putin nothing and cost us everything.
So a surrender, not a solution, in their view.
Yes. And they label this approach, again quoting directly, that's not leadership. That's cowardice dressed as confidence. Very strong words. Then they introduce a timeline, a specific challenge. They note, and now, 148 days since you claimed the imaginary mantle of your second term, the war has only escalated. Russia is attacking our cities harder than ever.
So they're pointing to continued escalation after the claim was made.
And asking pointedly, so where's your solution? It's a demand for substance behind the statement. The conclusion they draw in the letter is blunt. Donald Trump never had one because you never care to understand what we're fighting for, the ad. You only know this war through the lies of the man who started it. This conveys a deep sense of frustration and cynicism about external promises versus their ongoing reality.
Beyond these specific points, the letter also offers a much broader, almost historical judgment on Donald Trump. It states, "You are a mistake. History will remember not as a leader, but as a cautionary tale." It continues, "A man who once held the most powerful office in the free world and used it to praise tyrants, undermine allies, and divide his own nation. That's a profound indictment from their vantage point."
It is, but what's also significant is that despite this incredibly harsh critique of Donald Trump himself, the letter expresses a continued faith in the United States as a nation and its people. They state very clearly, "But we still believe America is better than you."
That's an important distinction they're making.
A very deliberate one. They praise what they call the best of the United States. They mention soldiers who liberated Europe, human rights defenders, journalists, ordinary citizens who know right from wrong, and they make a promise. We will never forget the Americans who stand with us. But then, the contrast. We will never forget the few who stood on the wrong side of history, and you are one of them, placing him firmly in that category, in their view.
And how do they frame their own struggle in this context?
With resolve and self-reliance. The letter asserts, Ukraine does not ask for charity. We fight this war with our own blood. They see it as their duty to respond, especially, they say, when someone like you speaks with such contempt for truth, justice, and human life. And the closing lines are incredibly powerful, really summarizing their stance.
What are those final lines?
They say, you may respect Putin, we never will. Followed by, we don't expect you to understand courage, we're too busy living it. It's a final assertion of their own experience, their own values, and a complete rejection of the perspective they're addressing.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've heard directly from this open letter a raw, powerful voice from the people of Ukraine as they present themselves. It confronts issues of leadership, accountability, the language used to describe conflict, and the stark realities on the ground. It's a direct message, bypassing any intermediaries.
And it leaves us, and you, the listener, with something significant to consider. What does a document like this, in its directness, its detail, its unvarnished emotion, reveal about how fundamentally different the interpretations of power, courage, and even truth can be, especially during a time of intense international crisis? It really forces a reflection on the weight words carry, especially from global figures, and their very real impact on those living through conflict.